Howdy, fellow Doctor Who fans, and welcome to a Texas-sized edition of Who on Who, the podcast devoted to the review of classic series Doctor Who DVDs in no particular order. I'm your host, David Huey, and back with me again by popular demand is the Texas Time Lord himself, Mr. Steve Distasi. Hey, Steve.
Howdy.
Welcome back.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
I was referring to you as the Martha Jones of my show because you're gone, then you're back, then you're gone, But hey, I love having you, so I'm glad you're here.
Well, I'm not as cute, but I think I'm just as clever.
I agree. I agree that you are definitely as clever. Now, I don't know about the cute thing. I've never seen you, but Steve is actually in Texas, so we were talking about this being the Texas-sized edition. For those of you listening across the pond in the UK, you may not understand that analogy. Everything in Texas is bigger. So if you ever get a chance to come here to the States and you want some really good toast with your breakfast, ask for Texas toast. You'll be amazed. It's like a whole loaf. I mean, everything's big, right?
Really? Wow. If you say so, sure.
That's what I've always heard anyway. So anyway, in my last episode where I reviewed Ghostlight, I mentioned to the listeners that I would not be recording another episode until I reached the 500 subscriber count. So obviously, because we're here right now and doing what we're doing, we have reached that threshold. As of today, I have 581 subscribers to the podcast. So
congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you out there, to the new subscribers. Please drink the Kool-Aid, get in the pool. The water's fine. Welcome. I'm so glad that you're here and that you're willing to listen. And please, this is your show. So you are more than welcome to email me and, give me any sort of feedback or any sort of input that you would like. My email address is david@whoonwho.com. That's HOO on WHO.com. Just like the name of the show. It's kind of fancy how it worked out that way. So, speaking of email, I actually have an email this time.
Here's the mail, it never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes, I want to wail.
All right, this email comes from John in the UK. John writes in, "Hi, David. He's talking about last episode. That was your best podcast yet. Great job. I believe there were too many technical issues involved to create an extended version of Ghostlight. The only copies of the deleted scenes that exist are from VHS rather than the original master tapes, and they also have the time code prominently burnt into them. So this would have been very jarring in an extended version each time they showed up on the screen, so it was decided that reintegrating them into the DVD wasn't a viable option." And what John's talking about, in case you didn't listen to last episode, and shame on you if you haven't, is that I pointed out that one of the problems I had with Ghostlight was that I felt that without the extended scenes, there were too many holes in the plot, and it didn't make as much sense to me. It just wasn't as smooth. Steve, have you seen it?
Actually, yes, and I remember I really enjoyed your last podcast about it too. By the way,
oh, thank you.
That's one of my favorites, actually.
Ghostlight.
Really? You're going through the episodes. That seems like it's my favorite top 10 or top 20 list of shows. But yeah, Ghostlight's one of my favorites. Now I've had the opportunity to watch it, a couple of dozen times, so I don't have any issues really with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I imagine the first time I did see it was probably a little confusing because it is kind of, it is a little strange. And I think the more you view it, the more you get.
Right.
Definitely.
I think it made more sense to me the second time, definitely. So I agree with you there. But anyway, John continued on in his email. He gave me the web address for the Doctor Who Restoration Team site, which is www.restoration-team.co.uk. He said they're a great resource, particularly if you have any technical queries about any of the Doctor Who DVDs. It's where he gets his information and where he got it on Ghostlight. He said they have an article about the work involved for the making of each DVD. Not sure if it's too late to suggest a DVD to review for your next podcast, but I think logically you should fill in the gaps and review either a John Pertwee or Colin Baker serial. How about Time Warrior or Vengeance on Varos? Thanks again, John. John, thank you very much for the email, and I will go over this, of course, at the end of the podcast as well. But taking your suggestion, I am going to go ahead and do Vengeance on Varos because I really want to give Colin Baker a decent shake. He's never been my favorite Doctor, but I've never seen that particular one. And hey, it's got Perry in it. I've always been kind of partial to her anyway. So I think that's what I'm going to be doing on my next episode. But thank you again for the feedback. And like I said, yeah, anyone is welcome to shoot me a message at david@whoonwho.com. Love getting them and hearing from the folks out there. Going along with that, the official Who on Who website is live and it's up. The address, of course, is whoonwho.com. Thanks, many thanks to Dave Hingley, the wonderfully talented artist who drew my new logo. Dave has been helping me and pretty much taken the reins of designing the website as only an artist can do. And I also want to give a special shout out to Dave's brother Mike Hingley. They're over in Birmingham, over in the UK, and I affectionately refer to Mike as Brother Mike because that's how Dave refers to him to me. But Mike is a bit of a programmer and has helped Dave work some of the technical bugs out as well. So it's not 100% yet. Please be patient. We're trying to get content up as fast as we can, but it is pretty to look at, and we are getting a forum put in place, a blog. There will be a store link where you can buy your official Who on Who T-shirt and wear a T-shirt when you're out cutting the grass with my ugly mug on it. And let's see what else. We're going to have a links page, and I'm really mostly excited about the forum because one of the things that I think is so great about Doctor Who fans, I've talked to some other podcasters who have been amazed at how many subscribers I've picked up in such a short period of time. And that is nothing to do with me or this podcast as far as I'm concerned. That's everything to do with the quality of fans that love this show, Doctor Who. I mean, I think that there's a real sense of community. The same people that go to Podshock and go to Tin Dog Podcasts and CIA and a lot of the other Doctor Who related sites and podcasts out there, they're just loyal. They're loyal to a fault, some of them. I love all of you very much, and I appreciate it. I am actually in talks with the guys at Podshock to maybe go to Gallifrey convention next year. So I hope
That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited because I've never actually been to a Doctor Who convention. So I want to go and meet some of the people face to face and get to meet some of the podcasters and maybe rub elbows with some of the Doctor Who stars and production team members as well. I mean, to me, they're the real, interesting folks to talk to. So.
David, how often are you going to update your blog? Is that going to be like a weekly thing, or?
Well, they say that what they say about the road being paved with best intentions. I hope to have the blog updated weekly. I will kind of step out here right now and let everyone know that the blog may or may not be Doctor Who related all the time. It's more of a stream of consciousness kind of thing where I may just go out there and if I've got something that I'm happy about or irked about or whatever, that may just be my sounding board. It may end up being like my personal journal on the web. But read it. You'll get a chance to see what it's like in my head, which is not a altogether unscary place. But anyway, all right. Well, I don't have anything else. Steve, do you have anything before we go into the DVD?
No, actually, I don't. No, I'm just a regular old guy. I really have nothing. I mean, if anybody's got any questions or wants to email me, of course, I'm at texastimelord@gmail.com. Now, I am putting a little call out for an old friend of mine who I met back in the late 80s, early 90s. I've been thinking a lot about. She was a Doctor Who fan. We belonged in a club together, and we used to talk all the time. But I've been looking for her online. And I'm in hopes that maybe she listens to the show. Her name is Cassie Hughes. If by chance she's listening, give me a drop, and I'd like to get back together and catch up on old times. I know that sounds a little personal, but
No, not at all.
if anybody knows her, drop me a line.
Yeah,
Like
I'm glad you said that, and because of this story, I was actually going to say something very similar. We're getting ready to review the Five Doctors, which was the 20th anniversary special of the show. This was the very first Doctor Who episode that I ever saw,
wow.
and so there's a certain amount of it's got an emotional connection to me. I have very fond memories of it. So, in that same vein, if anybody knows Todd Smith out there, Todd L. Smith, his wife's name is Cicely. Todd and I haven't seen each other in years. If you know Todd, I don't even know where he lives anymore. Todd's the one that introduced me to Doctor Who. So if you know him, tell him I said thank you, Todd, if you're listening. Thank you, and shoot me an email because I'd love to hear from you. So, anyway, let's get the TARDIS cranked up here. We are going to be heading over to November 25th, 1983. Steve, I can't reach that button over there. Hit that for me with that mallet, would you?
Got it.
All right, thank you very much. Here we go. Everybody hang on tight. Here, November 25th, 1983, the 20th anniversary special of Doctor Who, a 90-minute special. This is technically, if you go by the story numbers on the back of the DVDs, this is the Doctor's 130th adventure. Like I said, this was the very first story that I ever saw, which may be kind of a confusing entry point for a new Doctor Who fan, but I was fascinated with regeneration. I was fascinated with the idea of, I had seen, I remember having seen magazines in the comic book shop that I used to frequent back in the 80s, like Starlog and those kind of things, and they were covering the Five Doctors, and there were pictures of all five of them, and not being a Doctor Who fan at that time, I didn't understand. I thought Doctor Who was Tom Baker, with the scarf and the hat and the whole thing. And so I'm looking at this picture going, okay, I don't get it. So years later, like in the early 90s when I first got introduced to Doctor Who, that was my first question. What's the deal with Five Doctors? I said, then they told me about regeneration, and I was hooked. Because the idea of the Doctor being able to regenerate and be completely different and all that just really grabbed me. So I'm like, that's what I want to see. They're like, oh, that might be a little confusing. I'm like, no, I want to see it. So this was my very first one. And I after that I was hooked. It wasn't like an addiction or anything like that, but I was hooked.
Oh yes, it was.
Yeah, I guess it was. Yeah. Now Steve and I both, in preparation for this, watched the brand new 25th anniversary edition of the Five Doctors, which is kind of funny because it's the 25th anniversary of the 20th anniversary. It came out, in 2008 then? You do the math.
Yeah, it came out in, I think it was March of 2008.
Yeah. And if you're looking for this particular one at the store, if you don't have it or looking to rent this, keep in mind that the graphics on this match the new series actually much closer than they do the classic series, and so it looks completely out of place. It's pretty easy to spot if it's mixed in with the rest of the Peter Davison adventures, but it may not be. It may be off, to one side or another, depending on if the person at your video store has any idea what they're doing when they're, filing their Doctor Who stuff. So there is that. Let's jump in. Let's talk about it, Steve.
Sure.
What do you love about it? Hate about it? Wish was different?
I guess I'm going to come off as a complete Doctor Who fanboy because every time you ask me about an episode, I love it, and this is one of those that I thoroughly enjoyed. I think, in a sense, the story is weak. It doesn't have a very compelling story in the sense of, there's a President Barusa is looking for immortality so he can rule Gallifrey forever.
Right.
I don't find that very fascinating. But what is really fascinating, which makes this, a above and beyond story for me, is with all the actors in it. Well, there was a hidden commentary with David Tennant on this, and he jokingly referred to this as the 3.5 Doctor Who story. It's not really 5 Doctors; it's 3.5 because you got William Hartnell, playing. I'm sorry, Richard Hartnell playing as William Hartnell, as Doctor, and then of course Tom Baker really wasn't in the show. And so in that sense, it's more like 3 Doctors really from this show, but just the concept, you gotta suspend disbelief that Richard Hartnell is the first Doctor. You've got to just accept that, and it's just entertaining to watch the interaction with the Doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And I know myself and you included both really enjoy multi-story Doctors.
Yes.
And this one really excels out of all of them that are out, but. Was that a problem for you with Tom Baker not being in it as much, and then Richard?
I kind of wish that Tom Baker was in it, but going back and watching this particular one, it's occurred to me that, and of course now we have 10 Doctors. Oh, well, we actually have 11 Doctors if you take Matt Smith into account, even though we haven't seen his Doctor yet. But if somebody was to actually try to do a 10 Doctors now. Although the logistics are absolutely insane, it would be almost impossible from a story perspective to do it because you couldn't do each Doctor justice. And that was this is the first time when I've watched this that I've looked at it and thought, okay, maybe Tom Baker not being in it was a good thing because they would have had to have balanced that personality into the mix as well. Some of the DVD extras, which we'll talk about later, and some of the commentary talk about where he would have fit into the story and how he would have fit into the story, and it would have been, very different. As far as Richard Hurndall, now that I've seen a lot of William Hartnell stories, I see the difference between the two of them.
It's a lot. Actually.
Yeah, and it is. It's big. It's a guy dressed to look like William Hartnell, and he's got the right attitude to be the first Doctor, and it's not to the point where it's distracting for me, but it's not William Hartnell. It proved to me that we could recast the deceased actors at this point if we wanted to film a multi-Doctor story with, Pertwee's Doctor, Troughton's Doctor, Hartnell's Doctor, whatever. We could recast that. And I think it would work to a degree. Now, some Doctor Who fans may disagree with me on that. You're not getting the genuine article,
No.
But you're getting a reasonable facsimile that still allows you to tell the story that you want to tell. At least that's my feeling on it.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, if RTD or any future episode of Doctor Who, they said we're going to do a 10 Doctor episode, 11 Doctor episode, I really would not want to see them recast, any of the deceased actors. Doctors, I don't know. I just it would bother me, and I don't think it really bothered me so much in the 5 Doctors because at the time I had no history or watching any of William Hartnell's episodes.
Yeah, I had
no clue who. I mean, I knew of him,
right?
But I couldn't tell you. I mean, I knew of an Unearthly Child. I think I'd seen, but that was pretty much my extent of his episodes at that time.
Mm-hmm. But, see, like I said, this was my first episode, so I mean, Todd, the guy I was talking about, I don't think he was even in high school at the time. He was just a kid. And so we're sitting watching this show, and he is basically filling in the blanks for me. He's like, "That's the first Doctor. That's his granddaughter Susan," which sent me off down a whole other trail. Then that's the
You
second
and
Doctor.
every other Doctor Who fan in
Right,
the world.
exactly. And then, that's the Brigadier, and we paused a lot watching it because there was a lot of little things that you don't appreciate until you really start getting steeped into Doctor Who a little bit more, and
Right.
So it's really only now that I think I've got every Hartnell DVD that's available right now, and I've watched them. And while Hartnell may not be my favorite Doctor, I know him better now. That when I went and watched the Five Doctors now, I was like, that's not quite right. It's not completely off. I mean, I can look at that and go, okay, yeah, that's the first Doctor by his physicality and everything else. And I loved his interaction with Peter Davison. I loved the first Doctor referring to his fifth incarnation as my boy because physically he looks younger, but
Right.
in reality the fifth Doctor is older than the first Doctor. So
Did you ever find that confusing? Even in the I know it's not a discussion for today, but in the Three Doctors, I always find it somewhat confusing that the newer Doctors always looked up to William or Richard in this case. Like they knew more. As a matter of fact, it was Richard's first Doctor who came up with what what the puzzle meant at the end of at the end of the show.
Yeah.
He figured it out. I always thought that is really odd because wouldn't the older the Doctor got, wouldn't he be more wise and more understanding? He would know what the first Doctor and second and third, fourth were thinking, but it was always the first Doctor who was always the smartest to figure things out. I always found that a little odd.
I thought exactly that, and the only thing I can come up with is that when the Doctor's personality changes and when he regenerates, the original concept with the Patrick Troughton regeneration was that the Doctor just got younger. It was still the same Doctor, so they didn't really coin regeneration until later, but I don't know. Maybe when the personality shifts, he's basically reborn as a new person, at some random age, physical age. But while he's got all the memories, he may not have necessarily the right mindset, or I don't know. To me, I would think the fifth Doctor would look at all of them and go, okay, hold on, I can deal with this, Plus, there's that whole continuity issue of he's experienced it all through each one of their eyes before, kind of thing, or has he not? It's kind of weird. So.
Well, it's also kind of, as a Doctor Who fan, you try to work things in and try to make logic, because there's actually quite a few holes in this episode, which we'll discuss later, I guess. But the thing during this episode, why I loved it and enjoyed it, I had to tell myself constantly, Steve, it's just a show. It's just a show.
Well,
it's not real. It doesn't have to make sense.
Let's talk about the faults.
Entertainment.
Let's go ahead. Let's talk about the faults. Let's talk about the holes. Let's throw a few examples out there and let's toss them out there.
The biggest issue I had, as you know, Patrick Troughton's one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
But it's as if when they were writing the script, or putting the script together, they just completely forgot. I don't think they forgot. I just think it was a matter of time and resources. But with Patrick Troughton, when he's at the tower and he bumps into Zoe and Jamie,
mm-hmm.
When he realizes that what he's seeing is just a ghost, it's just trying to confuse him. He says, "Oh no, I know it can't be you because the Time Lords wiped your memory before they took you from me."
Right.
Well, then, how's the Doctor there? Because at that moment, when they took Zoe and Jamie away, they
mm-hmm.
forced him into a regeneration.
Right.
And then John Pertwee.
Right.
Well, so what did they say? Oh, well, we're going to let you go off and say hi to the Brigadier for a couple of minutes, and then you got to come right back. And then we're going to... That wasn't the case because they had trapped the Doctor, and there was no way they were going to let him go because he was,
Well, there's that theory of season 21B or not. I guess not 21B. What's the season? There's a theory that there's a missing season between Pertwee's first and Troughton's last, where he went off and did things as an agent for the Time Lords before they actually forced the regeneration, and that's where the two doctors comes in, and where because he and Jamie travel together a little bit more. I don't know. I mean,
I've never heard that, but that's interesting.
Leave it to Doctor Who fans to make continuity work when continuity is not going to work.
Right.
You know what I mean? Sometimes, like you said, you just have to look at it and go, okay, for the same reason that John Pertwee was able to know that his replacement was all teeth and curls.
That's right.
Right. Sarah Jane said, the last time I saw you, and she starts making these vague hand motions. Her line was supposed to be all teeth and curls. Pertwee wanted the line, so they gave it to him, as an ego thing or whatever, and he delivered it. But it doesn't make any sense because how would he know that?
I know this is going to go in the extra section, but I want to get it out before I forget. One of the things that Peter Davison said in one of the specials on this discs was that he was asked, what personalities do you think would have clashed? And he said Tom Baker and John Pertwee. Otherwise, he thought everybody else would have gotten along fine.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
It doesn't surprise me. I mean, having watched both of them and really being a fan of both of them, but to me, they are, and it's funny because I've been thinking about this a lot, having decided to go with a 6 Doctor story for the next podcast, and thinking about how I've said on here before that Tom Baker is kind of hit and miss for me.
Mm-hmm.
And Pertwee is too. I've got several of his DVDs, and some I enjoy more than others. And I think it's because the reason that I like Patrick Troughton, and the reason that I like Sylvester McCoy, and the reason I like David Tennant's Doctor, because they're nice. There is no not nice part about them. For the most part. Now they can be very, I guess, stern.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this fatherly sort of just polite era about them that you don't always get with those other doctors, and I don't do rude very well. I just don't as a person. So maybe that's part of the turnoff for me. So yeah,
you can't be a William Hartnell fan at all then.
Actually, though, William Hartnell, I can forgive it because he's old. That's I guess I don't know that I look at him and I think, okay, he's old. Yeah, that's another one of those things where I could see that. I could see where their personality. They both were, brilliant for what they did because
Mm-hmm.
their personalities were so strong. That's most of your really good actors, are that way.
Well, they say from what I've read is that when an actor takes on the role as the Doctor, I think Pertwee was quoted as saying this. That he asked, "Well, how do I play him? What is he? What should I do?" And they came back to him and said, "Just play the Doctor as yourself. Be yourself, and it'll fit." And I think one of the things that Pertwee had a problem with because he was such a he had done a lot of parts, and acting was in his blood. He said, I didn't know who I was. He had to figure out who he was, what kind of person, what were his likes and dislikes, because he was so used to playing other people.
Mm-hmm.
He was more comfortable doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But in Doctor Who, he had to figure out what he enjoyed, which was apparently kung fu and gadgets.
Cars. Fast cars.
And yeah.
Go John. Well, any other faults that obviously the story is riddled with little inconsistencies here and there, but anything glaring to you other than now that we're talking about certain things like the Patrick Troughton thing?
Besides the second Doctor, no, not really. I don't know if it's something I've just overlooked and I just hazed over time, but I've always been curious about Sarah Jane in her time in the episode 5 Doctors. When we flash forward to current Who and we see her again in
oh yeah,
school reunion.
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, so I there may be a perfectly normal explanation, and I had noticed it in this episode. Like when everybody goes back to their own time, does she get taken back and she completely forgets the episode of the Five Doctors, which is what I'm thinking has happened. Is that was completely wiped from memory.
I don't know because I was thinking about that too, and for those of you listening in or scratching your heads and wondering if you missed something, basically what we're talking about, I believe that if I'm right here, is in School Reunion when she meets David Tennant's doctor and she says to him, "You've regenerated." He says a half a dozen times since the last time I saw you, which would mean he's talking about the fourth incarnation, Tom Baker. Not Peter Davison. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And she does run into Peter Davison's doctor at the tail end. However, there is a very confused look on her face because I did watch it very carefully. And she comes up and she says, "It was nice to meet you." Like she's not quite sure who he is. And Pertwee says, "Well, it was nice to meet you too, Sarah Jane." And she looks at him and he says, "I'll explain later." So,
right, and she's seen a regeneration. She saw Pertwee.
Yeah, she did. That's right. She saw Pertwee regenerate to Baker, and so yeah, I mean, she's...
And so did the Brigadier was there with her at the same time, and
right.
He obviously, he has memory of regenerations, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, because he said something. He had run into the Fifth Doctor in Modern Undead.
Right.
And of course knew the second, third, and fourth as well. So he's always making that joke about wonderful chap, all of them, that thing, and which I enjoy. I love the Brigadier, so I really wish they'd bring him on Current Who. I really do.
Isn't he coming on? Kind of off topic. Isn't he coming on one of the Sarah Jane adventures? Has that already happened?
Yeah, he was on one of the second season adventures, and it was great to see him. But I would just like to see him interact with the Doctor.
Has that aired yet? Is that because I don't follow Sarah Jane Adventures?
It has aired in the UK. I don't know if it's aired here in America or not, but I do know that it has aired in the UK. And my 8-year-old son is completely hooked. I bought him the first season DVD of Sarah Jane, and he loves it. I mean, he just loves it. Watches it all the time. So.
It's not too scary then, because I'm afraid my kids might be scared.
Occasionally, yeah. There's a couple of episodes that he won't watch, but for the most part, yeah, he really likes it. So, well, okay. So we've been talking a little bit about some of the holes. Let's talk about the great bits. Okay, there because there are some of those too. I mean, like the Brigadier, making his little comment about the Doctor. What are some of the things in this that stand out to you as like, wow, that's a great a great bit for Doctor Who fans. I mean, there were so many nuggets that were put in there just for the fans.
Sure. Well, and I know earlier I came off bashing Richard Hurdnell, and actually he did a great job. For what was expected. I really enjoyed his portrayal of the first Doctor. I think that he did a pretty decent job, given what he had to do. I mean, who else could? I mean, that was big shoes to fill, and he did a pretty good job at it. But anyways, just his delivery, I thought he did a great job. Like I said, it was very believable that he was the first Doctor. I didn't have that's some actor,
right?
I mean, just seeing the Doctors interact with one another, that's always fun. I think that's what makes these multi-Doctor stories so fun, is just seeing them interact with each other. What issues are they going to have?
Yeah. Will they get along?
Exactly. Right, exactly. Are they going to try to beat each other up?
Right.
Love the Raston Warrior. That today is one of my favorites. I know that they probably couldn't write a script for that baddie, just because it's just too powerful.
Well, apparently that was a last-minute addition, which I didn't know that, but they were. I was listening to. I think I was listening to or watching one of the DVD extras, and they were talking about this, and they said that they had gotten a note from the producer or director. Somebody sent a note in saying that the third Doctor and Sarah Jane made it to the tower too easy, so they needed to put another test there. So that was just a last minute pull it out of your butt kind of thing that Terry Hicks said, okay, here we go, and they went with this Raston Warrior robot, which is too bad because I would like to have seen him again. He
would have kicked too much booty.
He's pretty cool. I mean, he took out the entire Cybermen group there, and I think they need to bring him in the New Who. I think,
Yeah.
guard the
Another thing
TARDIS.
I really enjoyed was at the very beginning, they play that quote from William Hartnell,
Mm-hmm.
where where he's basically his goodbye to Susan. Even if I've had a couple of drinks or not, that just brings a tear to my eye every time I hear that quote.
But let me ask you about that. Now, did you think that was fitting? I know they did it as a tribute to Hartnell, and I thought
Mm-hmm.
that was sweet. But let's say for the uninitiated who don't know where that comes from, and granted, most Doctor Who fans are already fans before they watch this, but to me, I remember the first time I saw this, I thought that was a little confusing to play a black and
Really?
white clip of him um, saying goodbye to someone
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't know who it was at the
Right.
time, and then the show starts, and then then we see him getting captured and all that sort of thing. But I just wasn't sure that.
Well, you had to have William Hartnell in there somewhere.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's
You
true.
had to have him somewhere.
Okay, I'll concede that. Yeah, I agree with you. Okay.
But I know I like the quote. I mean, I definitely see your point. How well, what's this?
Mm-hmm.
What does this have to do with this show? Because it's obviously a different person than who's about to portray the First Doctor. I can see that definitely. But I don't know. It's just I think what makes it so heartfelt is William Hartnell, the First Doctor, isn't talking to Susan at that point. He's talking to you. He's talking to the person watching. And that's how I take it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll be back. Don't that he's got all these expectations. I unfortunately I can't quote anything, so I don't have that kind of memory. But basically, he's saying, I have great expectations for you, and I will come back, and it just, I don't know, it kind of brings a tear to my eye. I feel like he's talking to me.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe that's the beer talking when watching.
And that's not regular beer, folks. That's Texas beer. It's bigger.
It's bigger and better, yes.
All right, that could very well be, but yeah, no, it is a very heartfelt speech. So I will agree with you there. Okay, here's a question for you. Overall, all right, how rewatchable is the Five Doctors?
Oh God, it's very.
I mean, it's only 90 minutes. You got to love it for that. But what do you think? I mean, is it rewatchable?
Definitely. I mean, I've watched this episode countless times, David.
Mm-hmm.
I have bought this particular episode many times. I've owned it on VHS. I've owned it when it came out on DVD the first time. And this newer version, I bought that again because I had to have the one of the bonuses on there.
Mm-hmm.
But I have bought this thing so many times. I bought this more than I bought Star Wars.
Wow.
That says a lot. And that's just an episode I will if in 25 more years they have additional footage and they're going to add something to it, I would say I'd buy it again.
Right. Okay.
It's
well,
worth that much to me.
Well, very cool. I agree with you. I mean, I sat through it once while preparing for this, and then taking show notes, and then I watched it again just for my own enjoyment without the homework part of it, and did that as well. And my son watched, or one of my kids watched with me, my younger son, and then I watched bits and pieces while I was going through the DVD extras, and I always enjoyed it. And like you, I have 2 different DVDs of it right now, and it's, to me, it's sentimental, but it's I think it's very rewatchable as well. I think that they did a great job with it, the timing, the pacing, and everything. So,
do you prefer the original aired version, or do you like the new updated, 2008 version?
I like the updated one.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's that different, but or that much different from the original, but they did tweak the special effects, and I like that because I think it just embellishes and just kind of adds to it. So,
Well, I kind of noticed they tied up a couple of loose ends in the newer version. I mean, really minor stuff. But while I appreciate that, I think I enjoy the original version myself, just because that's what I remember watching. Back in the 80s. That was what that's my memory.
Right. And for those of you who are wondering about this 25th anniversary edition, actually has both. It's got 2 DVDs in it.
Yes.
It's got the original and the 2008 edition. So you can pick and choose. You can watch either one. So.
I prefer the black triangles over the swirly, whirly things.
Yeah. Now I will give you that. I did prefer the black triangles over that.
It seemed very. I'm trying to think of a movie. It was a Star Trek film. No, it wasn't Star Trek. I'm thinking of Superman. Superman 2, when the 3 villains.
Oh, the Phantom Zone. Yeah, the Phantom Zone.
Yeah, and then they're being swept away by that black obelisk-looking thing. That's what it reminds me of. It fits that 80s vibe for me. It's so 80s, and it works. It works for me. I love it.
Somebody figured out how to do that special effects back in the late 70s, early 80s, and they thought, well, we're going to take this to the bank and just use it as much as we can. So it shows up, but that's all right. All right, well, let's go right down to the wire here then. How many Cloister Bells would you give this out of 5?
Out of 5, I'd give it, as it goes along, I think I originally would have said 5, and it's an awesome story, but I think I'm going to go with 4.5.
4.5, okay. I'm going to go ahead and say 5 out of 5, and I agree with you, and probably would say 4.5 or even 4, but because of the sentimentality for me, I'm going to say 5 out of 5, and there are very few that I would do that for, but I mean this is one that I could watch anytime. If someone said, hey, let's watch a Doctor Who episode, this would be one of my first. Yeah, let's throw the 5 Doctors in.
I couldn't imagine this being your first, because I would think that would just completely confuse me.
I'm weird that way. It's kind of like for the Americans listening here, okay, when they switched Darrens on Bewitched, I was completely cool with that. I liked the second guy as much as the first guy. There was a British Robin Hood series called Robin of Sherwood back in the 80s, and the guy that played Robin Hood left, Michael Praed, and Sean Connery's son, Jason Connery, came in and took over as the new Robin Hood. And while some people have issues with that, I love that kind of thing. I think that's very interesting. Okay, how are they going to bring this character in? How are they going to make him replace him? That kind of thing.
Right.
So for me,
it's kind of like James Bond.
Exactly. The whole James Bond thing. I like all the Bonds, some more than others, but to me that's James Bond on screen. It doesn't matter who's playing it.
Did you ever try to rationalize that in your mind? Because I always think, okay, new actor, and in my mind, I think they, that they go to Bond and say, okay, you need to get some plastic surgery. Your face is looking, the bad guys are starting to know who you are.
They said something on the last Podshock episode that Bond was actually a Time Lord and that he's trapped on Earth, and I thought that was kind of funny. But no, I don't think about it. I assume that. Let's say Pierce Brosnan is Bond, that in all the past adventures it was Pierce Brosnan. To me, it doesn't really matter.
Well, the timeline's completely messed up, especially after the last 2 movies. The timeline, in my mind, is completely messed up. It makes no sense whatsoever.
I know, but
they're enjoyable movies.
It's the nature of the beast. They have to do it to keep the franchise alive. So we just kind of go with it. So all right, well, listen. Why don't we go ahead and move on to extras.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Extra, extra, read all about it.
Okay.
All right. This 2-disc 25th anniversary set literally has a ton of DVD extras on it, between what's on the 2008 disc 2 and what's on the original disc. There's just a ton of them. I'm gonna talk about some of them and get your thoughts on them as well. The first one, which to me was probably one of the best ones, was a extra feature called Celebration. It was hosted by Colin Baker. The Colin Baker, yes. And it was a review of what was going on with Doctor Who in 1983, during the time of the 5 Doctors, and how big it was, what success they had with John Nathan Turner, how he was able to get publicity and do all of that, and some of the um, uh, public appearances and specials and all that was going on at the time. And I found that to be very informative and kind of a neat little insight into what was going on over in the UK during that time.
Yes, it was. Actually, there was a couple of extras I enjoyed, but that was one of them. That was one of my top favorites on this set, this disc set. One of the things I found really fascinating was when they were interviewing Liz Sladen about the photo op they did with all the 5 doctors.
And the wax, and the wax dummy.
Right. John Nathan Turner thought in advance that I guess Tom said he was going to be there, but didn't. So he kind of had that forethought. He had that forethought. Well, I better get a stand-in just in case, which was very smart of him actually, because apparently that's what happened. But Liz Sladen was not happy.
No,
with the other actors or what they did with that wax dummy.
Apparently they were playing some pretty raunchy games with the wax dummy, and
I can only imagine.
Goofing around as guys are prone to do. I'm a guy. I mean, if I was in that situation, I probably would have goofed around too. And you could kind of tell by the look on her face that it was very disapproving of. I think she felt that they were being disrespectful to Tom Baker. But, arguably, some people could say Tom Baker was being disrespectful to the show that made him a star.
That's what Peter Davidson said on the same special, was that, they all felt, here we are, we're all together, we're going to do this for the show, and Tom snubbed them, and that's how they felt. And I can see that. I mean, I can see both sides, but I remember, I thought that was very interesting, because when I was really deep into Doctor Who way back when, I had all the hardcover thick books that had all the history. It's like a Celebration. I'm trying to think of all the others, but I'm sure most of the diehards probably have the same books right now. But I would look through the pictures, and there's this wax dummy of Tom Baker, and that always confused me. Like, well, why is there this wax figure that? And I always figured there's going to be a story behind this, either. And there was. Apparently, there was, and it just proves to me there was something to that, and I find that completely fascinating.
Yeah, I did too. And they also mentioned something else on that extra. They were talking about the original working title for the 5 Doctors was going to be the 6 Doctors.
Yes, that is very fascinating.
And that one of the early story treatments had, I don't know if it was going to be William Herndal or not, but he was going to basically be an android version.
Oh, wouldn't that make sense? That would make so much more sense.
I guess it would have made sense,
love
but
that idea.
I don't know. I mean, once you go down that road with Chameleon and all that, and I think we learned our lesson that we probably need to. I think it was better to have the first Doctor be there and be a viable part of the story, whether he was played by Richard Herndal or William Hartnell. I think that was much more important to the passing of the torch between him and Peter Davison after 20 years than an android replica. Because how would you explain that? What happened to the first Doctor if they have an android there?
I got a question. I don't have my Peter Davison notes in front of me, and maybe but was Chameleon introduced before the 5 Doctors? I can't remember.
I don't know. I know that he wasn't there for long. I believe that he was. Okay, yeah. John.
It was in
the UK. Jump on here, John. Send me an email.
I know he was in the King's Demons. I remember he was introduced in that episode, but I cannot remember.
But then he went away pretty quick because it just didn't
work. It had to be before, because in the King's Demons, Turlough wasn't a companion in the King's Demons.
Right.
I think it was.
I think it was right around. It was after Turlough came on. I'm pretty sure, wasn't it?
No, I think it was before.
Oh, was it?
Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm a little sketchy in that area of the Fifth Doctor. So.
Any complaints about us not knowing Doctor Who? That goes to David.
Right. There you go. That's TexasTimeLord@gmail.com. Anyway, so
you get old. These things happen, all right.
I know. Hey, believe me, I know. Audio options on this disc included a companion's commentary. This is, excuse me, on the first disc. The original broadcast had a companion's commentary with Carol Ann Ford, Susan, Elizabeth Sladen, which is, of course, Sarah Jane Smith, Mark Strickson, who played Turlo, Nicholas Courtney, the Brig. Um, that was a great commentary. I did listen to it. They had so much fun. It was so much fun recounting everything and talking about different scenes that they were involved in and their history. And you can just really hear, while they don't come off as being close chums with each other, you can hear the camaraderie because they've all served, this show in their own, in their own regard, and I really did like that a lot. There's also an audio option of just isolated music. I talked about this on Ghostlight. I don't understand why they do this. I don't get it. I tried it out. I thought maybe I'm wrong. I turned it on and watched the scene where Peter Davison was fading on the floor of the TARDIS, and when there's no music, there's nothing, folks. Absolutely nothing. There's no dialogue, and then the music will come back up, and you got no idea what people are saying unless you turn subtitles on. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, if you
There's
like
got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason. 'Cause I don't understand that either. It seems really backwards, but
yeah, because okay, the music is there on the normal track when you're listening to the dialogue. So, I don't know. Maybe it's for the people who like to listen to background music while they're doing other things, and they like that, and there was no soundtrack. I don't know. I can't come up with it. But again, there's the info text, the audio options are on there. Trails and Continuity photo gallery, and the radio time listings, which are on just about every Doctor Who DVD out there. But, folks, there is a very special Easter egg on here, and I'm going to let Mr. Steve explain this Easter egg because he told me about it.
Well, and this was the reason I bought this disc again.
Yeah, me too.
I mean,
after you told me about it.
If it wasn't for this, I would not have reinvested $25 to $30 onto this set again. But there is a hidden commentary on disc 2 with David Tennant and Phil Collinson, and I cannot think of the lady.
Helen Raynor.
You're right.
Yeah,
because they do a commentary.
It's actually on disc 1.
Oh, is it disc 1? I thought it was disc 2. Okay, but yeah, no, it's a hidden commentary. Basically, once the should I tell them how to access this, David, or should I?
Go ahead. Well, no, I'll tell you what. Let's not do that because I like to have people go looking for them if they can't find them. But okay. So we'll leave that off. But go ahead and tell them the details of what they're doing.
But basically, Helen really didn't say much, but David Tennant and Phil Collinson both had a lot to say.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I heard that Phil was, and of course David as well, were big Doctor Who fans.
Right.
But I never really took much thought into Phil Collinson at all being a big fan until you listen to this commentary. This man knows his Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah.
It is scary how much he knows. And actually, it's wonderful. It's not scary. It's wonderful. It's wonderful that a fan. Well, he's no longer the producer anymore, but that someone who was such a fan of the show, ended up producing a couple of seasons of the current Doctor. There's some choice information in there that you hear from them. I think one of the things that really struck me as really fascinating from Phil is the fact that when they there's on the soundtrack of the first this is the revival, season 1 and season 2 with David Tennant and Christopher Eccleston. There's a soundtrack called The Doctor's Theme. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but there's a woman kind of I don't want to say moaning because that sounds bad, but almost like crying out the Doctor Who tune, and that is considered. They were joking as they always thought that was Counselor Flavia, which is in the Five Doctors. That they imagined that was her singing in that soundtrack.
Yeah,
and I thought it was fascinating.
I thought so too.
But David Tennant is a big fan, obviously, and it's just fun to hear two guys who are in the current Who just geeking out.
Exactly, and this is the kind of commentary I love because these are two guys who have a close working relationship together. they are having a blast. Now, it helps that they're drinking champagne at the
Champagne.
time. And there's no secret there. They just finished filming season 3 Gridlock, because they talked about David Tennant hanging from cars and jumping from cars
Right.
to cars that day. So they were done filming. They come in, they sit down, put on the headphones, and start doing this. And they just had a blast. And the wonderful part of that, as a listener, is you feel like you're sitting right there with them, laughing it up and watching this show that we all love. And you're right. I mean, you can tell that Phil Collinson has a true, deep, abiding love for Doctor Who, and he had to, because if they had given the producer job to somebody other than him, or even Russell T Davies, who didn't have that love for the show, I don't know that it would have been as successful when it was relaunched.
No. I agree.
So I think that I mean that was when you sent me the email and said, hey, we were talking about doing the 5 Doctors. You said I went and got this, and there's a hidden commentary. I mean, I was like, oh, okay, that's the deal breaker. I gotta go get this. So I went and bought it, and that's why. And it was very, very well worth it. So.
And my wife, she's not a Doctor Who fan. She enjoys. Actually, she's a Torchwood fan, which confuses the heck out of me. But she sat down and listened to this whole thing. She enjoyed it. I think she enjoys the behind the scenes kind of stuff. But she definitely she had a kick out of this. That hearing the current crew and production company talk about the past crew and production company.
Right.
It is. It's very fascinating. It's a wonderful thing because it's 25 years. I mean, a lot must have changed within the BBC in that time. And matter of fact, Phil Collinson talks about that. Like, well, that's not how we would have done it today, but back then they would have done it this way, and that's why it came out such and such. I think it's a wonderful commentary. Maybe in 25 years we'll get, hopefully the newer Doctor.
That would be something, wouldn't it?
Yep.
Right. Well, Disc 2 has its own fair share of extras as well. It does have another commentary for the Disc 2 Special Edition version, and this is a production commentary with Peter Davison and Terrence Dicks, the writer. Also good. I didn't listen to the whole commentary there, but mainly related to, in this scene we were going to do so-and-so, like the scene where Peter Davison's Doctor is talking to the Master, and he says, like Alice, I choose to believe 3 impossible things before breakfast, or whatever. That was actually written for the 4th Doctor.
It would fit too. It would totally fit the 4th Doctor.
And the 4th Doctor was the one that was supposed to confront Barusa, because Terrence Dicks said, of all the Doctors, the one that would be most likely to go dark, that fear would be the 4th Doctor. So. It still works out with Peter Davison, but it's really interesting to get that insight into this is how we wanted to do it if we'd had all 5 of them.
Of course, I'm sure, as everybody figured out, Tom Baker was originally written into the script, and they totally expected him to be in this episode. And I actually read online that if Tom had appeared, that the companion pair-up would have been completely different than what we've seen.
I'd heard that. I haven't read that, but I did hear that.
But the 4th Doctor would have teamed up with Sarah.
Uh-huh.
The 3rd Doctor would have been with the Brigadier, and then the 2nd Doctor would have had Jamie. But I think there was some scheduling issues with
Fraser?
Brandon Fraser and
Fraser Hines.
Oh.
Yeah, you're going American.
Oh my gosh!
Right now, all the Brits are going who?
Oh my gosh! I can't believe I just said that.
Fraser Hines, folks. Sorry.
Brandon Fraser is in The Mummy.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, everyone. Anyways, if you have any complaints, email David.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think that would have been really fascinating to have seen that kind of.
I agree. There's another extra called The Ties That Bind Us.
Oh,
I liked this one because it was narrated by Paul McGann, And while he was narrating it, I'm like, I know that voice, because I've been listening to the Eighth Doctor
Right.
audios, and then it come up in the credits, and I'm like, oh, that was Paul McGann, and it discusses the continuity issues, similar to what we talked about. It is a newer production because it shows a couple of scenes of John Sim as the Master, so this was actually done for the 25th anniversary. There's also, did you watch that, by the way?
I did. I was my actually my first favorite extra with this set, and the same thing. I was hearing the narrator. I'm like, I know that voice. What that is driving me crazy. Is that Paul McGann? No, it can't be Paul McGann. That wouldn't make it's just some random guy, surely. And I'll be darned, it says narrated by Paul McGann.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just awesome.
I thought so too. Yeah, they kind of get the Eighth Doctor in there a little bit. I thought that was pretty cool.
And in my my hopes and dreams of indoctrinating my children into watching Doctor Who with me, I forced them to watch that particular special because I thought that explains a lot. It's a friendly version. It's got upbeat music. Actually, the soundtrack is playing in my mind as we speak. It's got that upbeat song. It's really well put together. I think out of all the extras on this has the best production value of them all, and I really enjoyed it. And this may explain why in 20 years why my daughter hates me. But
oh, there'll be more reasons than that.
Oh yeah, there probably will be. Let's be honest. But I sat her down and said, "We're gonna watch this," and she's thinking, "No, I want to watch the newest version of My Little Pony." No, we're gonna watch Who, because obviously it's much better than. But anyways, I know all my kids watched it, and I thought it was very informative. Like, they're talking about how many times Eye of Orion had come up, how many times, or where the Doctor hitting the console.
Yeah, that was fun.
But yeah, I really enjoyed that, and that was definitely one of the things that was said about John Nathan Turner, which before watching this disc, I always had the pre-notion that John Nathan Turner was a bad thing for Doctor Who. And I don't know where I got that opinion. I think I got it from the Doctor Who clubs I belonged to. Everybody always kind of hated John Nathan Turner, JNT. He did these horrible things. He's the one that brought Doctor Who down. He's the one that came up with that crazy coat Colin Baker wore, so forth.
Question marks on the collars and everybody wearing the same costume every week, and yeah.
Well, yeah, while he did do all those crazy things, after watching these two discs, I came to the realization that this guy really loved Doctor Who, and he did a lot to promote it. And I'm going to change my opinion on him based on this, of course, because I'm a washout. But but he really did do a lot. I mean, he was dropped in as producer back, I guess, towards the end of Tom Baker, his last season. And he was there until Sylvester McCoy. I mean, that's a long time.
It's a long time. Yeah.
I mean, I love Doctor Who, but I don't think I'd want to produce it for that long.
I can't imagine all the personalities he had to deal with, in the BBC and out and everything else. I mean, it does say a lot. And for those of you who, like to pick and choose on your DVD extras, this one here, again, it's called The Ties That Bind Us. It's narrated by Paul McGann. It's on the second disc. It is probably, I have to agree with Steve, it's probably the best of the extras, and really, really worth seeing, if nothing else. I got to admit that the other extras on this disc are kind of a given. I could take them or leave them.
Kind of like the Blue Peter and the...
Yeah, the Blue Peter, the Saturday Superstore, the Nationwide interview with Verity Lambert, things like that. They're nice. It's nice to get a frame of reference for what was going on,
right.
But a lot of it is repetitive. It's the same stuff. There is one called Five Doctors, One Studio, where it's actually showing the studio blocking and recording of the scene where the doctors are all together in the Tomb of Rassilon. I was excited when I saw it on the menu. I hit play. Boring. Sorry, folks.
I watched that thing through, and I kept thinking, okay, it's going to get better any moment. Something's going to happen. It's just basically they would say a line, cut, okay, no, re-say the line, and they did that 5 times.
Yeah, but don't move your shoulder or don't stand. Yeah. It was just it was more of that, and it reminded me why I never got into acting, because I don't have the patience for that. I'd be like, look, I already said this line 10 times, so that.
Yeah, how could you say that convincingly? As if it was the first time you said it when you
That's
just
why
said.
that's why they're actors. I mean, it is maybe educational to see why, see how difficult that job actually is. Because I think some of us have this notion that they read the script, they do the blocking, somebody yells action, and they just get to play pretend and make gobs of money doing it. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time, getting things set up and all that. The outtakes were hysterical. I mean, I loved that Dalek going down the hall, going exterminate, exterminate. Oh bugger, I lost him because he couldn't find where he was supposed to go. And to me, that was just hysterical. I thought that that was well worth it. Watching that right there. And there is an Easter egg on this disc as well. Probably.
Do tell. I did not know.
Well, you didn't miss anything. It ranks up there with the lamest Easter egg I've ever seen in my entire life. That's all I'm going to say. Go out there, put forth the effort to find it, and you too will be disappointed that you lost 5 minutes of your life. But it's there. If you want to go find it. So.
Well, before we get off on the 5 Doctors, 1 studio thing, I will say this. I really enjoyed the behind the scenes with Patrick Troughton and John Pertwee, how they were playing off each other.
Yes.
John Pertwee was trying to get in the character, and Patrick Troughton pulls out some jelly babies.
Yeah.
trying to throw him off, and purposely trying to, kind of throw a wrench. And obviously, they get along really well.
Yeah, you could see the camaraderie there, and that was really nice because, on screen they have to play rather contentious with each other.
Mm-hmm. They were actually pretty good friends.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I agree with you. That was kind of a nice insight, but overall, that extra just seemed to drag on a little too long for my taste.
I got a question for you, David.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I can't remember which particular extra it was in, but it may have been in the celebration on disc 1, but it was the actress who I can't think of her name who played Liz Shaw. She had brought up that John Pertwee was quite rude to her. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do, and I think you're right. I think it was on the celebration extra. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she. I don't remember the exact details, but something to the effect of that he was. I don't even remember exactly what she said, and I don't want to cast the late John Pertwee in a bad light, but.
No.
I think it probably has a lot to do with what we were talking about earlier with the strong personality. You know what I mean?
Definitely, and I thought that definitely played in with what Peter was saying. With there might be would have been an issue with John and Tom.
Yeah. I mean, some actors get a bad rap for being referred to as a prima donna, that kind of thing. But the weight of the show, when you're the star of a show, the weight is on your shoulders, and sometimes I think that stress manifests itself in different ways, and with certain actors, I think they become, not as congenial as maybe they would be down at the pub, when they're not filming, because they're feeling all that. So I don't know. I don't remember the specifics, but I do remember what you're talking about, and it was
something about her delivering her lines. But nonetheless, I thought that was just interesting.
Yes, that's right. She said that she delivered the line, and he looked at her and he said, "You're not going to deliver it that way, are you?"
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was fascinating because John, I actually met him at a convention once.
Really?
And he was a wonderful guy. As a matter of fact, it was I'd probably been watching Doctor Who just for a couple of months, and a local convention had come into town, and he was the doctor, and who was going to do autographs and stuff like that. So he was actually one of the first actors I ever met, and I really thought he was wonderful. Mm-hmm. So it really shocked me when she said that. I'm like, no, I can't believe it. I always, I don't know. I always thought that was interesting. That one little snippet of her opinion always, I don't know, it just struck me.
But depending on what day you catch somebody, they can either come off as being the nicest person in the world or a big jerk. I mean, it just depends. And who knows? Who knows what was going on at that particular moment?
Right.
You can kind of tell in that Five Doctors One Studio extra that he gets a little perturbed when he has to redo a scene, more than a couple of times because of, you could see it on his face. He's like, all right, if this kid asks me to step over here one more time, we're going to practice my Venusian Aikido on him, all over the place. So, you could kind of see it, and I was like, oh, it's coming, but it didn't happen.
Again, I know I'm going back and forth with Richard Herdnall, but Herndahl, but during that Five Doctors One Studio thing, I mean, he was very professional. He would deliver his lines, and he would let the other two doctors, 2 and 3, do their thing, and he just let them do it.
He seemed to defer to them too. I noticed that he would, like, I saw at one point he sort of under his breath talked to John Pertwee about how he was delivering that line and should he do this or that kind of thing. And I thought that was very telling. I mean, he knows that he's the least experienced of the bunch, so.
Yeah, exactly. No,
at least playing the Doctor anyway. I don't know. His CV may be huge. Outside of that, but.
Well, and a lot of I'll be honest, a lot of the extras with this 2-disc set could be viewed once, and that would be the last time you need to watch it. But like I said before, the Ties That Bind, definitely. I've seen that 3 or 4 times now. The Celebration, that's something I've watched 2 times already. And then of course the David Tennant commentary. That definitely, I've only listened to it the one time, but that is definitely going to be re-listened to again. So definitely, if you're going to pick that up, I would, I'd recommend those 3.
Yeah, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I think those were the high points of the extras on top of just an excellent adventure. It's just fun. I mean, it's what Doctor Who is all about. And if you're a fan and you haven't seen it, shame on you. You need to go see it. So I mean, it's readily available, and I think everyone should own a copy of this one for sure. So
great.
That's my take on it. Anyway, okay, I think that brings us to the end. Again, next time I will be reviewing the 6th Doctor adventure, Vengeance on Varos, thanks to John in the UK. Again, I would like to encourage you to go to the new website, www.whoonwho.com. Give me some feedback on that, what you would like to see. Trust me when I tell you there are some amazing things coming that aren't on the website yet. A big shout-out thank you to Dave Hingley and Brother Mike for all the hard work that they're doing on that website. Believe me, it is 99% them. And if you're over there in the UK and you're looking for an artist, and I'm really trying to convince Dave that he should do web design because he's very talented. That's the guy you need to talk to. You can email me, and I will put you in touch with him if you want. Again, my email address is david@whoonwho.com. The guy who took so much of his time to hang out with me today, Steve Distasi, his email is texastimelord@gmail.com. So any complaints you can forward to Steve. Any of the happy stuff you can send my way, and I'll see you next time. You take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye.